I mean, for me, I've always been a big fan of human potential. I always believe that there's more to reality than this dream. And, I think in order for some of us to wake up, we need a wake-up call. And I got my own wake-up call and got run over by a truck in a triathlon and broke a bunch of bones in my back. And prognosis was probably I'd never walk again. And they were, four surgeons recommended some radical surgical procedures. And it was 1986, and I don't think in 1986 many people said no to doctors, but for some reason I just couldn't bring myself to that choice because I was a young guy and very athletic, and I just thought maybe there's a chance that my mind could heal my body. I mean, if I don't get the surgery, and I could still be paralyzed, but if I get the surgery, I could still be paralyzed or be injured. So I decided against it, and it worked, and it worked way better than I anticipated, actually, and it got me thinking about what in the heck happened to me. I mean, how did that happen? There's got to be a scientific explanation for it. And I couldn't find those answers in conventional texts. I couldn't find the answers in a lot of the conventional understanding of why health and science was really talking about the way human beings heal. So I only could find those answers when I started looking at some of the new sciences. And the new sciences had everything to do with this concept called neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to change its connections by learning and experiencing and making different choices and demonstrating different behaviors. There's physical and biological changes. And then what if the mind does affect the body? And so I started looking at psychoneuroimmunology, and there's just a host of great research to show how our thoughts actually become our body's biggest enemy. not really heal us, but actually weaken the organism. And then I started looking at the effects of stress, and then I saw that stress downregulates genes and creates disease. And so then I had to look at gene understanding, and then I got into epigenetics, and it made sense to me that we're not doomed to our genes, that it's just a code. It's a library of potential. It's a parts list of possibilities. And so is it possible to change our gene expression? Well, when I saw the vertebrae in my spine that were pretty, 6 of them, compressed, and all of a sudden they got some normal height back, I thought maybe there's a gene that I signaled, and genes make proteins, and proteins make structure, and proteins are responsible for function and physiology. And the expression of proteins is the expression of life. And so I thought, God, I must have been able to do something to my gene expression because the protein scaffolding of my bones had changed. So then I started thinking, well, how does a cut heal, or how does something heal? And I started looking at the text again and reading how a cut heals. And I just thought that can't be the way it works. It just isn't that mechanical. It's not reductionistic like that. It's much more vitalistic. And so when I was a kid, my father was very keen on me going to medical school, but the more I came close to that model, the more it was mechanistic for me, and I was more of a vitalist. I believe that there's something else that's giving the cell instructions and information. And so then you can't explain how a cut heals without understanding quantum physics and how energy works. And then I started entering this world of quantum, and then, wow, somehow the mind has an effect on reality. And well, it works for the really tiny with subatomic particles, but how do we get it to work for large things like planets and real life events? Can your observation begin to change an outcome in your life? And so I sold everything, and I had a great practice, and super busy in Southern California, and worked with some of the professional teams there, and I just gave it all up. I wasn't the same guy anymore, and I just wanted to figure out how this all happened. So I went back to school, started studying again, and then I started thinking, God, is there anybody else that may have had a similar experience like me? And so I started interviewing people that had spontaneous remissions from diseases, people that were treating conventionally and unconventionally, and they were either staying the same or getting worse, and all of a sudden they got better. So I wanted to know what the cause was that was producing the effect. Now, listen, I was a Puritan at the time. I exercised, I ate really well. I made my own food, my own breads. I was a Puritan, and exercise. I had a martial arts studio, I had a yoga studio. I did triathlons. I was in a pretty good place. And when I started interviewing these people, I thought that they would be doing something that was in common, right? And it wasn't diet, which really surprised me, and some of there's diet, some worked when they did certain dietary things, and it wasn't Pilates or yoga or whatever, which I was really into, and I just couldn't figure out. What I found out was really a lot to do with the mind. Like, there was a lot to do with the mind, which was my experience. And so after interviewing all these people, I found out what the commonalities were that allowed them to go from a state to a really healthy state. And I teased them out, and there were 4 common things. And when I started understanding what those things were, the scientist in me said, okay, if this is true, then it should work on other people. So how could I create a way to have people understand the science of transformation and change, and how they possibly created a health condition? Is it possible then to change it? And would they have to change something about themselves in order to change their health or their life? Because nothing changes in our life until we change. That's the end of the story. And a lot of people think they can stay the same person and that their life will change, and it doesn't work that way. So I started looking closely at our personality, how we think, how we act, how we feel. And is it possible if a person changes the way they think, the way they act, and the way they feel, if they change their personality, will it change their personal reality? Will it change their health? And so that was one of the fundamental principles, that there was a reinvention of self. And then there was the other important thing, which was so valuable, which was breaking the habit of being the old self. And a habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. It's when you do something so many times, your body now knows how to do it better than your conscious mind. Now it becomes a subconscious program. So that's 95% of who we are. So the process of change then requires that we become conscious of our unconscious self, so conscious of those hardwired thoughts, those automatic habituations, and those emotional reactions and conditionings, so conscious that we don't go unconscious and return to that same personality, because the disease and the gene expression and the biology will stay the same. If we can change that and sustain it and begin to fire and wire new thoughts and begin to rehearse new ways of being in our mind, and begin to teach our body emotionally what a future event will feel like before it happens. If the environment signals the gene according to epigenetics, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, could we signal genes ahead of the environment? Is that what these people did? And is that what I did? So I did my best to demystify the process and use it on people to see how if they could change. And for the first couple of years, not a whole lot happened. I mean, people felt better at the end of a workshop. And then after a couple of years, we started seeing people step out of wheelchairs, and we started seeing people, cancers go into remission right in a weekend event. And that's when I knew that I had to start measuring. And that's when I knew I had to really look to see what was going on in the brains of these people. So I assembled a team of scientists and researchers. We've measured over 12,000 brains now, maybe even more than that. And I wanted to see people's brains before they came to an event, put them through the rigor of transformation, keep them in the same environment, give them the right information, have them understand what they're doing, understand why they're doing it, use science as the language to demystify the process so the how gets easier, and assign meaning to it. And if you can put intention and meaning behind it, could we get better results? And so we want to also scan brains in real time. I wanted to see your brain, Glenn's brain, in a meditation when he is either overthinking and overanalyzing, or he's learning how to suppress his analytical mind and get into the operating system where those subconscious programs exist. And the word meditation, really one of the important elements is to teach people how to self-regulate and create more coherence and change their brain waves so they can really begin to reprogram themselves. And it means to become familiar with, to become so conscious of the old self that you don't go unconscious to it, and so familiar with a new self that you become that person. And so we started measuring heart rate variability, and we wanted to see when a person's frustrated, impatient, resentful, their brain waves get a little bit aroused and their heart beats out of order, and now they're out of balance. Their physical and mental health is off. And that in that state, when we're incoherent, biologically we're incoherent in our mental health state. So is there a way to create more health and more balance? And we came up with an understanding after looking at thousands of brain scans and a lot of HRV measurements that there's a way to actually teach people how to do that. And you don't have to be a mystic, you don't have to be a saint, you don't have to be a yogi. You could just learn the formula and what kind of effects would it require. So then we started measuring gene expression, and we saw that in 4 days people could change their gene expression. In 4 days they could make genes, activate genes that make new neurons in their brain, not make new connections, but new neurons. Genes that promote, oxidative balance, genes that strengthen the immune system, genes that activate stem cells that go to damaged tissues and repair them. These are all fundamentally important genes for health. And didn't matter what you eat, didn't matter what you drink, didn't matter what you did. It's just somehow if you came and you did it, what you believed in, this color of your skin, where you're from, none of that mattered. And so then we started measuring immune regulation. If you trade fear, if you trade pain, if you trade anger and aggression for an elevated emotion, and teach people how to sustain that state, will their immune system get stronger? And we saw that people can strengthen their immune system dramatically in a very short amount of time. We measured telomere lengths. Is it possible then to lengthen your life when your body's in balance? And telomeres determine your biological age. And lo and behold, 75% of the people in the study lengthened their telomeres in 60 days. They changed their life. They changed their future. They extended their life in some way. And so I got super hopeful about this. And then we started, I wrote 4 books. And what came along with that, Glenn, that was so exciting was the testimony. Nothing like seeing a person stand on the stage that came to the event in a wheelchair and is standing on the stage in front of an audience of 1,500 people as the example of truth and can walk normally. Nothing like a person with Parkinson's disease who has severe pain and tremors and can't walk in a frozen face, smiling and holding their hand out with no tremors. It's nothing like seeing a person with stage 4 cancer that was at a previous week-long event that showed up a month later at the next week-long event with her scans to show that she had metastatic cancer spread throughout her entire body. And then all of a sudden the PET scan shows it's gone, not there any longer, 0, nothing. Blind people seeing, deaf people hearing, and it got crazy. And so we have evidence in our scientific studies, and we have evidence in our testimony, and evidence becomes the loudest voice. And it's the magic number when we have somebody who is the example of truth stand in front of an audience and they look like a normal person. They don't look like a movie star, or they're not young and buffed and fit and look a certain way. They're just an average person. Mm-hmm. And they tell their story and it's not glamorous, but they're triumphant, and they kept overcoming and they kept showing up for themselves and kept believing in themselves. That's the 4-minute mile. That's that person that pierces a level of consciousness that says it's possible. Not only is it a footprint in the field, quantum field, but it's also evidence in 3-dimensional reality, and people lean in. And this is the cool part. They lean in because there's truth looking them right in the face. And they'll say, if that person can do it, I can do it too. And just like an infection spreads amongst the community and creates disease, health and wellness becomes as infectious as disease. In our events, we see people. I just watched a testimonial yesterday of a guy who came in a wheelchair. I mean, he couldn't walk. He couldn't take more than a few steps. Very debilitating neurodegenerative disease. He leaves the event, he leaves his wheelchair and his walker, and it's not the first person that happens. So that's evidence, So then we started partnering with universities, and we said, okay, some of these people are having dramatic changes in their hearts, in their brains. And we started working with universities that have the sophisticated instrumentation to measure cellular biology. Thousands and thousands of metabolic reactions that are taking place, and looking at the plasma and blood of people that do meditation. We started seeing then, when we subjected their blood to like a virus that behaves exactly like the COVID virus, that their body was immune to the virus. The advanced meditators, it wouldn't enter the cell. And this is super compelling data, because that says that there's something within us that really has a profound immunity to the environment. And we've isolated now the factors in the blood of advanced meditators that are so important for that. And then we started taking the advanced meditators' blood and subjecting it to cancer cells, uterine cancer cells, and seeing how the mitochondria, which are the engines of the cells that keep the cancer cell almost immortal, drive the energy out of the mitochondria by 75%. Took the wind out of the sails of cancer cells. We see people that have, we take advanced meditators' blood and we subject it to people with neurons that have Alzheimer's. And all of a sudden you see the gene downregulated. So there's something in the plasma that makes us very hopeful about human potential. And the real key element, the most important element, is it's not anything out there that's going to do it. It's all in here. And